Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of In Lay Terms. I got my two friends back with me. Tim, how's it going?
It's good, thank you.
Andre, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you both.
It seems like just yesterday we were together talking about the upcoming BC election, and now it's come and passed, with the exception of some recount issues. And I just couldn't wait until next week, and I begged you two to come on. So thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
Uh, why don't I get the conversation started? The outcome was 45 seats for the Conservatives, tentatively, 46 for the NDP, 2 for the Greens. To me, that's a 45-48 split, and that is a failure. And beyond that, we were joking about this backstage. There's so many swamp donkey, swamp monsters that have infiltrated the BC Conservative Party. I'd say there's like 30 good ones in there. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. There has been trouble inside the BC Conservative Party at the executive level for several months. And while the party was able to make progress on the provincial front, they have a lot of structural and executive issues that need clearing up before I think they can effectively pick up more seats in the next election, which Rustad is already chomping at.
What do you mean, like there's issues in the party? Are you talking about like their email servers down?
No, I'm referring to autocratic behavior at an executive level.
I heard that it wasn't necessarily Rustad. So this is all rumors. I heard there's that lady that's suing the party. She goes around and sues everyone. If her name comes, Carrie Simpson, I think.
Yes.
So she's claiming that there's some, super secret council that meets in smoky rooms and they make all these decisions. And there's some truth to that. They overruled a lot of the EDAs. Is that what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
The many local ridings were ignored in the candidate selection process, and that's a matter of record. So within the structure of the organization itself, there are concerns with respecting the Constitution and due process within the operation of the party itself. And I can appreciate that, and I'm concerned about that as well. Yeah, you have to juggle, and I hate being the guy who said I had to pinch my nose and mark an X, but this is pretty close to that situation.
I may be guilty of that. I literally, I think I used that exact phrase when I said I voted Conservative.
Yeah. However, the Conservatives that I have worked with and supported here in the Valley are all top-notch people, and they intend fully to represent their constituents. Right. So the quality of the candidate and the quality of the riding association that supported them are top-notch. So there is a disconnect between the ivory tower behavior of an executive level and the grassroots behavior down where the people live. And that needs to be sorted out if the party expects to gain more seats next time around.
Sounds like you're describing government.
In general.
No. I don't know, Andre, if you want to jump in.
You pick up my words. No, but maybe they have good example in the federal government. What we see now, it is what 46 for the NDP, 45 for. So it will be a minority government, or they will, I would say, they will try to, I would say, to reach NDP, not NDP, the Green, to form a majority government, but it is very, very short majority.
And they've already done that. In his acceptance speech last night, Ebby said, I've already been talking to the Green Party leader and we are going to work together. So he called dibs on the Green Party.
They're used to coalition everywhere. And what you were mentioning, Tim, about the fact that you have some conservative or really good, I would say good representative. how can they influence the government? Because if it is the NDP that runs the show, they will propose this some law, some legislature. So how?
Global News, Global News, who I was following last night and been pulling some of my information from, have been saying things such as BC Conservative Party has all new candidates. They're all green behind the, wet behind the ears. They have no experience. But the men and women that I've seen operate as candidates through the preparing for this election, they are all professionals in their field.
Mm.
And they are generalists in the sense that what they do, they're good at. So the media may try to paint them as, fresh and inexperienced, but an example would be, Heather Moss here in Chilliwack North, and she's been involved in politics and the education process for ages, decades, and she knows what she's doing, and she's capable, And the same thing with Alia Warbus in Chilliwack Cultus Lake. So this is the region where I live, and she's well educated. She's well spoken. She has a very capable way about her with social media and her ability to relate to those in her age group and whatnot. And she's done exceptionally well. So these are experienced people. They're not green people.
Can I let me hijack that? I was thinking about what are the reasons that the BC Conservative Party lost. This is a failure in my mind, and one of the ones is that they did not have the media on their side.
Well, that wasn't ever going to happen.
No, I get that, but we have this. I'm just going to call us populists, whatever. Our side, where we're trying to do politics differently, we have this belief that we can maybe get a fair deal out of the media, and that's never going to happen.
No.
And this is a perfect example where they say these guys don't have experience. So the media is basically saying, whoever's already in politics, whoever we've already vetted and let them in, those are the only people that we're going to allow to win. Everyone else is inexperienced.
Right. So that sounds like academia, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess the expert class.
Right, the expert class. So the what I call the elected nobility, right? The only way to get in, right? The only way to get in is through despotism or nepotism. Look at Ebi. He became private premier of a province by accident, just because he was the only available guy. He was not voted in. So there are failures in the democratic process that will be abused by those in power as long as the voter, the citizen, does not hold them accountable.
Andre,
that's where we are.
Andre's a philosopher. What did Plato call this? I'm having a brain fart. What did he call the expert class?
Well, the expert
philosopher
class,
kings.
yes. And there's one aspect that I would like to mention. But as a matter of fact, two. The first one is every groundhog thinks that he's an agronome in a garden. So they all think that they are so great. They have big egos. I have two concerns about that, about I would say, the elected elite. Political science, for me, it is not a science. It is an oxymoron. Political science is they study politics. Politics is the art of language. Science is something that is a homogeneous process, needs facts, needs rationality, needs deduction. It's the opposite of the politics. Politics is the art of speaking. So when we have this, we have some people who pretend that they can govern, but they're not governing on fact. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is 42% of the population did not go to vote. And there's nobody, not one politicians who will be concerned about the fact that you have practically half of the population who's not interested in voting. And this is a very big threat to democracy. And we see this everywhere in would say, the Western world. It is, for me, it is, how can you expect to govern as a majority or to have legitimacy if you are elected with 25 or 20% of the people? And that's a big question. And nobody is questioning this. I would say it is a fact. It is not an opinion. Statistics are there. So when somebody says, okay, I won the election, even if it is minority government, I will govern, let's say, with the opposition, we will do a coalition, or we will govern intelligently. They're not legitimate, because you have 40% of the population who do not trust them, or who are not interested. And it is a duty for me. It is a duty to at least to make an effort to choose somebody. I know a lot of people are disgusted by politics, so they do not choose. And when you look at, you were talking about the media. The media are, for me, they're propaganda. The mainstream media are propaganda. The conservative could not have won in BC because they, like you said, payment. They don't have any support. The media are supposed to be neutral. We know since Trump that they're not. We know it. We see it everywhere, everywhere. And all, I would say, parties that are outside of the, I would say, the official narrative, they will never be able to reach power.
So how do you get around that, though? That's my question. Like, if we know that the media is corrupt, and we haven't given up on the country yet, what do we do? Go door to door, like full on grassroots?
Well, my feeling is that, like Timothy said 2 days ago or 3 days ago, we have to go at a municipal level. We have to start at the bottom. If the structure is rotten, if the foundation are rotten, you have to start from the bottom. It doesn't mean you have to throw everything out, but it's true conversation with people. It's true debates, and it is very difficult because there's a lot of people who are not interested. They will talk about weather for 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and after that, as soon as you have a supper with friends, and you start talking about politics after 15 minutes, you will see 75% of people will go out with their glass of wine or their scotch, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about reality. We live in a virtual reality now, so we have to talk about politics. Politics is the center of our life. The police in Greek, it means public affair. So if somebody doesn't, if you're not interested in politics, politics one day will be interested in you, and maybe you will not like it. So
Politics is not interested in you. They're not.
well, it
Right.
depends.
So
It
when we
depends.
look at BC had a 57, 58% voter turnout. I prefer not to use the word turnout. I prefer participation. So then again, we go back down to the language, right? What language are we passing off onto the people as informative and emotive? We say voter participation. That's what I would prefer, participation. Voter turnout. What is that? It's what's the right word? Clinical, right?
Yes.
Right. So voter turnout. It's that no, I want citizen participation. The words ring differently, right? So the media is aware of language. So if we can't get ourselves in front of the camera because the camera says, well, we're not interested in you because Trudeau's paying us, right? Which is the truth nationally. So then what do? Municipal activity, municipal engagement, because if you're not getting exposure or results through media, then you bypass media. What did we do before television? Knocked on doors,
Exactly.
held tent events in the park, right? Held picnics and barbecues, panel vans and trucks driving down residential roads with a loudspeaker, right? Participation in parades. There are at least 2 parades that I'm aware of where the municipality declined a political float. They said, no, we don't want any floats that are political. Meanwhile, the SOGI and LBGT2, they were in the parade. They're clearly political movements, at the very least, lobbyists. At the very least, lobbyists, right? So
Maybe I would have a question for you, Timothy, and for you too, payment, because in the BC
Right.
election, how did the party run their campaign? You're talking about door to door. You're talking about events. Some people they they rent a bus and they go around. And so what was the main, I would say, strategy they used? Let's say the Conservative, the NDP, the Green, I don't know. The Green, it seems that they will ride bicycles so they can. No, but for the Conservative and the NDP, how do they campaign? It's because they have the media. They can access to the media all the time. Do they distinguish themselves from one another?
So this is where a riding association becomes very useful, because your riding association develops your local awareness outside of an election cycle. Right? So the riding association would effectively act as a franchise on behalf of headquarters, which would be the headquarters of the party. So then the riding association works in tandem prior to the candidate coming on board, if they don't have a candidate. Once the candidate comes on board, then the candidate becomes a public face, because that's who you're voting for. So what did they do strategically is the lists and the activities, the relationships that the association has built intentionally prior to the candidate coming on board, or prior to a campaign, that is passed off to the candidate, right? So then the association supports the candidate in this fashion. So whether it be door knocking, and there was plenty of that, sign mobs, not mobs particularly, but you know what I mean, like large groups that would go to a street corner, you know, at the edge of a park or whatnot, and they would stand there and hoot and holler and make noise because the signs are so obvious. One of the benefits of North American signage is we think in very simple terms on the color wheel. So blue will always be blue. It always represents a certain thing. Orange always represents a certain thing, right? Red always represents a certain thing. Well, in the States, blue and red are reversed compared to us, right? But regardless, they have certain meanings. So signage and T-shirts and other things themselves speak. So that has its own messaging. So that's the type of thing where if traffic is driving by on a Friday after work or stuff, then that's the kind of thing that they'll see. They'll attend events. The parades are ideas that are very useful, particularly civic events. Markets, right? The small outdoor markets, farmers markets, and other events like that are also useful. So, but the media element, don't rely so much on the camera, as in, you know, global news or CBC or whatnot, but to make extensive use of X and Facebook and whatnot. Instagram is even useful as a repository for photographs to building emotional engagement. Oh, I was there too, and I took a photo and I put it up there. So you can actually create, now grant you they're online relationships, but you can create online relationships, or at least buzz in your own groups. Yes, there's a silo element that's involved in this, the echo chamber problem. But if you're continuing to share and you teach others, you also share, then that group grows and that group grows and that group grows. It's slow and happens over time, and that's why an association, a writing association, would participate and lead in that first. Right. So it is possible to completely circumvent regular media and to utilize social media to your benefit, but you have to be very mindful of your tone. You can't be exclusionary. You have to be a big tent. Even the NDP has to be a big tent. That's why they're using diversity and inclusion. It's the pretense of big tent, right? So you have to do these things and encourage these things, and be mindful of the restrictions that certain platforms will pull on you and whatnot, and be creative, right? I mean, there's a line where Paul tells the readers, be as innocent as doves, but as cunning as serpents, right? So the campaigners here, knowing that the obstacles were BC News and the newspapers, were never going to give them A, the light of day, or B, a fair trial. So knowing that, then you take the technologies that do exist and you bend them to your will. And they were able to do that. The other issues, the structural issues, the problem with the fold-in of the BCU, I think those are outside the scope of local activity.
I was looking at the map of British Columbia and all the blue section and the NDP in the bottom, and I'm not quite familiar with it, but I found that interesting. I would be what you were talking about, all the strategy, marketing strategy, but according to you and Payman, what were the ideas that that the conservative were defending, and what were the ideas that NDP were defending? Forget about the green again, but but why I ask this question? It is because we we see what is happening now in Canada, and especially in British Columbia with the injection site, how they decriminalized drugs. They try to say that it's a progressive measure to counterbalance crime rate and everything, and it is a total failure. So, what was the main idea of the NDP and the main idea of the Conservative? Just so we can see what idea was pushed in front, because it's okay to have the message, but what is the core of the ideas?
I think it wasn't like your traditional campaign where you had one side give their ideas, the other side give the counter ideas. It was the media acting as the enforcement arm of the NDP, going out and every day beating the crap out of the BC Conservative Party. So it was just, they were putting the BC Conservative Party in the defensive. Stephen Malthouse, he's anti-vaxxer. Jan Webb, anti-vaxxer. Alexandra Wright, she made controversial statements about Soji and drag show. So when you do that, there is nothing there. So you're asking me, what was the NDP? What did they stand for? Well, I don't know, whatever they usually stand
Status
for.
quo.
Status
Yeah.
quo, that's what I thought.
I was going to say sexualization of children, drug use, safe supply, implosion of healthcare. But I think they didn't have charismatic candidates in the BC Conservative Party. So I got more exposure from the federal Conservative candidate in my riding than I got. I still don't know the name of the candidate, the provincial candidate that I voted for the BC Conservative Party. So I don't even know why they put their names on these signs anymore. Just do blue C, and if people want, they'll go vote for them. And Tim said that they vote. The colors have a certain meaning. I don't know if that's inherent to the color or if it's just that it's a brand. Like you're basically
That's a
voting
cultural
for.
association.
During the Maurice Duplessis time before 1959, you were not born and I was not born, but they were saying the inferno is red and the paradise, the heaven is blue.
Yeah.
And they were always so the reference to the color, what would the orange would represent? Orange, it is orangist.
Orange is warm, right? Orange is the middle of the warm colors.
So they always paint themselves as they are.
And there is psychology behind color, and I mean that's why it's used the way it is used.
Exactly.
An example. The Federal People's Party of Canada has an origin story around their color. And that is, one of the pollsters very early on was trying, and when the party had not yet decided on a color scheme, one of the pollsters very early on came down to, well, we have to include the PPC because they're getting numbers here. And what are we going to do? And it's, well, we've already got blue and orange and red and green, and we've got a lighter blue. Well, let's just use purple.
Yes, but purple, purple, it's
purple's a royal color.
Yes, but yes, that's a good point.
Right.
The other thing is that purple, it is a mix of blue and red.
It's a mix of blue and red. That's interesting. It could end up being centrist.
Can I throw a piece of history in here? King Ptolemy went from Egypt to Rome, and he was wearing, I think it was purple silk, and he pissed off Caligula so much that he executed him the next day.
Nobody wears purple but Caligula.
Be careful.
Yeah.
I would have a question for you both. When you talk about ideas, you talk about people. In BC now, we see that the Conservative went from what they rose from the dead.
Zero.
They rose from the dead. They went from 0 to 46. Yeah. So you could say that it is. Some people will say it is a moral victory. Like they were the challenger and they lasted 15 rounds. They lost against the champion of the world, but they lasted 15 rounds and they achieved the law in 1 year.
Yeah. Some sources
45
say
seats
this is
is not, it is not nothing.
Some sources say this is the first conservative government in BC in 100 years.
That we were talking about barometer election.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that
Mm-hmm.
we can be disappointed, let's say, as conservative people, but from what I see now, it is, I will not say it is a moral victory, but I think it is a good shot.
Does it not mimic Western Europe right now?
Yes.
So
Well, what you call populism. We saw it with Germany with the Alternative for Deutschland. We saw it. I think it is in Poland. They're shifting. Poland is a conservative, and they're shifting right.
Italy.
Even on I would say on LGBT, or I would say progressive concept. They're shifting right. I will not even talk about Hungary, because Hungary they're already I would say center right,
Yeah.
and they are very traditional. But there's a lot of countries in even in France. In France, it is Rassemblement National who won the majority, and the government had Macron. They had a putsch, and they had a coalition of three parties, and they could not even reach what the Rassemblement National de Marine Le Pen did, and they could not even form the government. It is a putsch, but it is shifting. It is shifting to the right, and let's forget right, the conservative side. If it would be maybe more diplomatic, because if you say you are shifting from the right, they will immediately push you to the far right.
I was gonna say, I was checking out online social media yesterday, and a lot of people had high hopes that this would be, the beginnings of a populist movement in Canada.
It is.
And I think the reaction from the left and the amount of money they threw at this. So one person said that the NDP invested in 8 million, the BC NDP, the Conservatives 200,000. I swear you could throw another like 20 million of the media going to bat for the NDP. So I think they tried their darndest to prevent this from happening.
Then there was a note at the bottom of the screen about Ontario's Conservative Party. That yes, that note. That, and I don't mean to put everything on one person the way I like to do it to Trump, but I'll do it to Doug Ford. Right. So Doug Ford is a globalist. He's been in bed with the federal Liberals on and off since before the Freedom Convoy. So you have a Conservative Party that is true. They have a conservative platform and conservative values in their policies, but their execution is autocratic. And under a globalist principle, moving toward WEF, the 17 Sustainable Goals, which is underneath the UN, these provincial governments, I'm not talking about other layers, are satisfied for the people to suffer to a point where they accept the solutions offered by 2030. Yes, they are conservative, and people are homeless, and healthcare sucks, and it is intentional.
That's first of all, that's a fact. We can see it, and in Ontario they have a big problem. They have Olivia Chow, who's the mayor of Toronto. I'm sorry, they're all fools. We were having a conversation before we went live, and I was saying, okay, Timothy will be the knight, Payman will be the cavalier, and I will be the jester. But where is the king? We don't see that.
That's right.
They are autocrat.
It's autocratic. Yeah.
But in a bad sense, in a pejorative sense, you could say that autocracy would be a way to protect people. The king had duty to his subject. The emperor has duty to his subject.
Yes.
Look at history.
Yes.
And now what we see is that they act like autocrat, and they don't answer. Write to your member of parliament. They will not even answer you.
Yeah.
We do not exist. That's quite fascinating.
This is another thing I noticed with the candidates. I reached out to everyone, the NDP, Conservative, and Green, and I think I might have even written it. I said, I just want to vote for somebody. If you email me back, just tell me your policies, I'll vote for you. None of them wrote me back.
You have your answer.
And these are candidates. Like at least candidates are supposed to suck up to voters.
They don't, because
do they have to? They don't have to. I mean, you know,
legally
let's
they
say
don't have
a federal candidate, first year in office, they will make about 175,000 before expenses, and then they may have a small budget on top of that, etc. But if they survive to the second term, they're going to be in the lobby payroll as well. They only care about the first vote. The rest is, well, we vote for the color, or we vote for the leader. We don't vote for the individual representative down in my riding or down in my electoral district. And that's on the people. That's on the people.
I think you and this guy think alike.
Yeah. Well, it's and the ability for the citizen to do something in their own town, to be active in their school district, to be active in their municipality, to be more vocal about what's going on with their local businesses and their vendors, their education system, their local healthcare, and to be proactive about that. We saw that there was more pressure applied on the provinces during the convoy by local protests than there was by the convoy, which was in Ottawa and served its purpose there. But locally, the province began to back off from their own issues, their own overreach, when local citizens were covering the overpasses every Saturday religiously, right? When they were attending small convoys in their own communities, right? So that's the way to turn things around. The Aesop's fable about the frogs complaining that they were always fighting with each other. So they said, give us a king, give us a king. And the gods said, really not inclined to give you a king, sort your own stuff out. No, give us a king, give us a king, until he said, fine. And he gave them a crane. And they stopped complaining because they stopped coming out.
So Tim, I got to get back. I got to start reading this Bible. I've never read it. When you say a crane, I'm assuming it's not like a
Aesop's fable. It's an Aesop's fable. The bird.
Okay, there we go.
Predatory bird, right? So the thing is, and history has said it's not just from Judeo-Christian scripture, but history itself says corrupt people get corrupt leaders. So on a larger scale, well, a family scale right up to a national scale, we need to be mindful of the character and the quality and the legitimacy of the people that we're hiring. Well, we're hiring them. We're electing to represent us, because they're going to be there guaranteed for a minimum 4 years. What other job in the country can I go and I guarantee myself 4 years the moment I sign the contract? Nowhere.
Well, you see, you referred to one of your viewers who said we blame Trudeau, but we are the problem. Us.
Yes.
All have, I would say, we all have a part of responsibility in that. What I would say is, yes, exactly. I believe it's us the problem. The fact that you have 42% of the population that did not go to vote. I make some jokes sometimes. I say, well, if you're not interested in it because it's very depressing, you don't believe into politics, so you will not mind if we deprive you from your right to vote. We will give it to somebody else, and you will have time to. Strangely, nobody answers me.
They are in the process of giving it to somebody else.
By AI.
The tune of 500,000 somebody else's a year.
And don't forget, Klaus Schwab was saying, I think it was in 2016 or 2018, he said, soon we will not have any election. It will be AI that will decide who's the most suited to run. You listen to that and you say, but maybe it's not that that wrong, because if you have 42% of the population who are not interested in who will govern them, I'm not talking about building a house, or I'm talking about the governments of a country, or a province. What are they thinking? Like you said, Tim, 4 years. You signed a contract. They will be there for 4 years. Even if
Yeah.
they have scandals, they will be there.
Yes, they will.
I would
Because
be there. I would be there with this kind of salary.
yeah, there was during Notley's time in leadership in Alberta a few years back, there was a push among some circles that I was familiar with that were saying, we want to recall the entire Alberta government. How do we do that? And I said, well, you actually have a process. They have recall in Alberta. And I said, but that would be a really big job. And I would probably get in touch with the Conservative Party or whoever the opposition was to say, hey, at a grassroots level, what was the possibility that you would support such an activity in whatever legal way you're permitted to do? And so that person said, that's an interesting idea, to put out their feelers. And the response was no response. So they contacted me a little while later and they said, what do you think this is? I said, well, why would I educate you on the means to do something that would stop me from doing it when I do it later? Right? Why would I educate you to stop your oppressor now when I plan to be your oppressor later?
Well, of course. But I can tell you, Soviet Union was acting the same way. The educational system was very good, and when the Communist Party understood that people were starting to be smarter, they started to do repression. So,
Yeah.
but what will happen now if the NDP is forming the government? Will they implement some change toward, I would say, the native, I would say, situation, or I would say the problem with drug in British Columbia? We see it everywhere, but I think that the window, or the window that we see, it is BC. What they will do? Do they have a program? Do they have a plan? We
I'm pretty
always talk
cynical,
about it.
Tim. Do you want to take this one?
The NDP has inherited their own $9 billion budget over deficit. There was a global news pundit that said that last night, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, the NDP has inherited their own $9 billion deficit.
Yeah, but like, is it in their interest to like? Do they care about balancing the budget?
No, they
Is there an
don't.
incentive?
They
Because
don't.
if you're going into deficit, you obviously don't care about balance.
No, somebody
And who are you
one day
borrowing
will
the
have to
money from?
pay.
Who are you borrowing? We say we're borrowing the money from our grandchildren, and I understand the principle, but where's that money coming from today? Where's that money coming from today? Is that a credit added to their bank account? Or is that actual cash? Are they putting assets, right, against future income? Where's that money coming from today? Where does anybody find $11 billion? Well, my guess is it's the World Monetary Fund, or the International Monetary Fund.
The International Monetary
The
Fund.
International Monetary Fund.
So if, according to what you say, we will end up like Argentina or Venezuela if the International Monetary Fund arrives here. I would doubt that now.
Well, arrives here. I suggest that it's already here because I think that they are the controlling interest in the Bank of Canada.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but if we look at, I would say, local problems like criminality, or I would say drug abuse, or I would say the deterioration of cities, and you see it everywhere. But why I say it is a window to Canada, or in the West, because Vancouver is, we see it often in the news. What the NDP will do that they did not do in the last 4 years.
If I can just answer that, I'd answer it differently. Like, why would the NDP want to change anything?
A winning formula.
They don't.
Right.
Destroying the province is a winning formula for them.
Well, no. I mean, like, the NDP has a brand, and that brand is, if someone's going to go do heroin, shouldn't the government provide that? if we have a housing problem, shouldn't the government step
Yes,
in and be
yes,
compassionate and deal with that?
yes,
Same thing with Soji. If somewhere there's a kid
yes.
that's trapped in the wrong body and you have abusive parents,
So
shouldn't the government, like, why would they change that?
is this not just a more subtle form of I forgot the phrase, um, taking taking the means of production? Is this not a more subtle form, right? If they're taking the means of, so, and what is the greatest element of production? Human labor.
Exactly.
Humans
Exactly.
are the single most valuable resource, right? Our lumber, yes, right? Our ore, yes. Our coal, yes. Our agriculture, yes. Our livestock, yes. Our gas, yes, right? But the single most valuable resource. And if I want that resource under my thumb, then I allow the margins to become so disenfranchised, so big, that they continue to pressure the center, continue to pressure the center, and I continue to take money from the center in order to um, make the problem worse. Right? So it once you set once you set the snowball rolling, as long as you keep it down that lane, it will keep gathering snow. Right. So I think going into this election, the NDP was thinking, status quo, we'll be fine. And I think that early on they felt that the Conservatives were not going to come close to a win. And the thing is, they came dangerously close to a win. So that is what you mentioned earlier, a barometer, right? Then if that is a barometer of what we expect to happen, because there are two other elections happening right now, right? New Brunswick goes to the polls tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow.
Manitoba shortly after that, and there is a blue wave over there too.
But
And
will they change? Will they change their policies? Because we see it as, first of all, when I say it is a winning combination because they're destroying the province. How will they react? Because now the Conservative won 45 seats. They cannot ignore that.
no, they can't. They can't ignore it because they lost high population, high density areas, right? Down here in the valley, compared to once you get outside the valley, population is very sparse, considering the vertical height of the province. Very sparse. It's the similar concept of the blue areas on the BC map are similar to the concept of the red areas on the American map, if I'm understanding that correctly, right? So you find that lower population or lower density, I should say, lower density areas make up the largest section of the geopolitical structure. But the high population areas generally are more liberal in their their psychology is more liberal minded. And that is often because pain and loss and the margins are in your face when you're on the bus going to work. Right? It is not so much in your face when you're in a rural community with 10,000 people,
Exactly.
right? Because chances are the alcoholic hobo from when you went to school with him, right? So that changes the nature of the relationship. But out here in high density areas, you have these nameless faces that I saw once and I'll probably never see again. And that presses on the psychology and that builds a natural liberal leaning mentality. And that's acceptable. But when you have governing bodies that use that to their benefit, that's disingenuous.
What about because when you look at the New Democratic Party in BC, do you can vote communism? Is
Right.
there a relationship between the NDP in BC and I would say Gavin Newsom in California? It's north south. Uh, we see the center is more conservative in United States Republican, and then you arrive Ontario, Quebec. It's more New England, New York, Washington D.C. So do we see a polarization? Because that could be a good sign for the election of the presidential election in 2 weeks. I'm not sure if Gavin Newsom if his state is because I remember in the presidential election, you have half of the Congress that will be in election. I'm not sure if Gavin Newsom is in this, but it can have an effect on their campaign too in the United States. Do you see a relationship between the Democrat in BC and the Democrat in California?
The Canadian version of the Democrat is Trudeau's Liberals, but leaning more towards Singh's NDP. So
because they have the same problem in California and Los Angeles. It's a junkyard. It's a junkyard.
And in all the movies where California slides off into the Pacific, I
It's always a happy ending.
I cheer a little bit inside.
Yes.
Right? And however, on the practical side, Canada does, BC in particular, does an extraordinary amount of business with the Pacific coast, right? Washington, Oregon, and California. Exactly. We do an extraordinary amount of business. So I find it really entertaining to know that California gets about a third of its hydroelectric power from BC and then does rolling blackouts and blames it on a lack of hydroelectric.
That's a good example. And there's another
brownouts
about Trans Mountain when I think it is
yes.
They blocked. I think it is Bitten who signed the block Trans Mountain after Trudeau bought the pipe.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like what, I don't understand what they're doing. Maybe I do understand too much. They're destroying the structure, the industrial structure for a purpose.
There was a note in the comment section here about the 407 being sold for pennies on the dollar.
Mm.
Right. Since when does the government act as a vendor?
Well, if you're a communist country, you do.
Right. But it's.
I think I know.
Governments are administrative bodies, in my opinion, primarily an administrative body. Right. The legislative aspect, I think, needs to be under much more scrutiny than it is. There are too many loopholes, too many abuses of Robert's rules of parliamentary order that allow large majorities in particular to railroad the process itself. And that undermines the principles of democracy. Democracy has an inherent flaw, and that is whatever the majority is, they rule. The people are the beneficiaries in that relationship as long as the majority is a just majority that adheres strictly to the rule of law and applies principles of fairness and respect down to the citizen level. But the moment that majority panders to the lobby, right, or panders to a minority, or panders to what's worse, because this is really what we're seeing, external influences, then the citizen is lost. And democracy permits that to happen. So the only way to return us to that is local engagement, local activity. Right? And if we put our Canada back, and I mean, I was born in the 60s, that Canada will never be back. And some of that is okay, right? But if we want a stable, let's put it that way, a stable Canada, right? A place that is safe so that when my children are younger, let's say that world came back, I could kick them out of the house on a Saturday and say, come back home when the lights come on, like I did when I was a kid, right? And that the community was safe to do that. And so there is a lot of support structure that enables, my 12-year-old daughter to go out and hang out with her friends and not worry about terrible things. So, everything from a police force that has integrity, right? Fire department, a medical system that is prompt, right? A justice system that is speedy, right? All these systems, the systems themselves still work. The people who we have permitted to be in power in those systems are corrupt.
Well, I could say, you say the system still work until now. Yeah. And you mentioned something that is important. There's a concept, it's called localism. And it was I learned that not so long ago. I don't know if the word in English is correct. It's subsidiarity, and it comes from the church, and it is a concept that was implemented in Switzerland, and it was coming from churches. They were coming, and Switzerland, they say it's a very good democracy, it's local democracy, and they are voting, they have referendum. So they vote on many, many aspects. What is interesting with this concept is that people, they are involved locally. And if the decision is not in favor of the people locally, it will not be implemented provincially or nationally. It's what we call bottom up.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
forces people to
Yes.
invest themselves locally on local subject. And then if it works, we have what we call revolution, bottom up, which is usually violent, or top down, which can be autocratical. So how can you reunite those two, I would say, two movements? The local movement with a good vision, and that you dig a tunnel from France to England, and you have bad engineer, you will go and you will not meet it. And we saw this. They built a bridge and they arrived like this. So what do you do? How can we reconcile the local movement, localism, with the, I would say, the top down? They call it top down the revolution or top down.
Yeah.
We need people who are at the top to understand what is at the bottom. If you don't have that, you will always miss the target. How do we do that?
Yeah. The bottom up approach, as you mentioned in that policy, I believe, despite internal issues, which are generally structural or egotistical, but so be it. But I believe that the BC Conservative Party is a real example of bottom up, because a year and a half ago, they did not exist except on paper. In the 2020 election, right, there were 0 conservative MLAs. And today, waking up today, 45 of them.
So you mean that the conservative will have, I would say, a very good leverage now, because they have, I would say, popular support, even if 42% of the population did not vote.
Well, the NDP no longer has a railroad majority, right? And they also don't have an opposition to get in bed with, because I'm sorry, but 2 seats for the Green Party is not going to make your life any easier. You still have committee heads who don't vote. You still have a Speaker of the House. Where are you going to pull these people from? You need every vote, right? So they have challenges. I hope that Rustad doesn't use this to simply stall government, and I hope that Ebby doesn't use this to not call the legislature back until the very last moment, as a means of punishing the people. I do think that there will be, and this is just me speaking from a Jungian perspective, I suppose. Having offended the tyrannical father, there will be retribution.
Mm-hmm. But let's say I have a question, maybe Payment and you can answer. We can talk about climate change, for example, and the Paris Accord or the Paris Agreement. And the conservative Poilievre did not distance himself from the Paris Agreement, and I suppose that the BC NDP are aligned with the climate change, I would say, ideology and the Paris Accord. Will the conservative push them to, I would say, to have a more clear position about that? Will they distance themselves? Because we see on a national basis, Poilievre does not distance himself from this agreement. He's always, dancing around, not saying if he will do it or not. What will the NDP will do in BC? Because if they are progressive like Gavin Newsom in California, they will continue, like, even if they don't have a majority. The train is going on. Yeah. It will maybe slow down, but it is still going on very fast.
Well, it's 45 seats. That's a lot of train. right?
I'm
And you don't
actually,
have to have high velocity for mass to have impact.
Exactly.
I'm not really optimistic for the future of BC. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but you still have the NDP majority. You have the two Greens. You have a whole bunch of BC United holdovers. They've kicked out. I know two really good candidates that refused to let run: Sean Taylor and Corey Morey. Three populist candidates that they kicked out, and the party seems to be an extension of the federal Conservative Party. So whatever was left is going to be conservative, like the federal party is conservative. So globalism is in. I don't think they're going to move on Soji sexualization because they didn't make it a platform during the campaign, and they're terrified of the media. I don't think they're going to be able to do anything with healthcare, even though they have a minority. Their healthcare policy was just chaotic. I think if the BC Conservatives had fixed those two issues, if they had included, sexualization as children, as Billboard Chris suggested, and they had a healthcare policy that was easily understandable, I think they could have gotten a majority.
But you see, you mentioned something interesting, and Timothy was referring to the election that will happen in New Brunswick. I think it is tomorrow. They will be re-elected, and they were against sexual gender identity in New Brunswick.
Openly, the media
it
shredded them for it.
Yes, so it will be interesting because if you have a more strong representation in BC and you have one in New Brunswick, it will start to spread slowly. It is long. It is a long process. People have to be aware, or they have to be, or sometimes they have to be affected directly to understand what is happening. When you see your child, 6 years old, arrive and say, a little boy says, "Mama, I'm a girl, and I want to have." When you're touched directly, that's why I talk about localism and what Timothy was referring to. We start at the basis of politics with people, what affects them, and we try to explain that if they are, I would say, stuck in an ideology like sexual gender identity, they have support. If they have support there, they will have. We see it with the inquiry in BC, and we see it with many aspects. The Coutts trial against the three people who spent practically three years in jail.
Yes,
it's starting to shift. We think that the institutions are corrupted. They are a lot, but there's still a lot of good and honest people. We have to rely on them, and we have to reach them. It's them who will bring the changes. It's not the people who are already there. They want the statu quo because it suits them.
So then that makes this about relationships.
Exactly.
Right? That makes this about relationships. It's who's in my family that's having a rough time. Right?
Wow.
And because if an ostracized member of my family, marginalized, let's use that term, is reaching to me and not finding solace, the NDP will reach out to them, right?
Well, they will reach for them. They will reach to them with what? With the injection site, and we understand how. No, it's a very important issue. They always paint people. They always propose people extreme solution. There was a woman in Ontario who went for a mastectomy, after brain cancer, and they proposed her maid.
Yeah.
And the woman, she testified, and she said, "I was so afraid when the doctor started to talk about this. And you're about to go under surgery, and they propose that. It is quite shocking. Morally, it is unacceptable. It is unacceptable morally. You do not arrive with an ideology like this toward a person that is already vulnerable with cancer, and she's psychologically in distress, and you arrive with this and painting this as healthcare. Will they continue with this policy?
You could take it to the next level. Like, imagine if a girl came in, a rape victim, and you're like, "Would you consider killing yourself?" Like that's the next. That's the end game.
That's that. But it is. They take this seriously, And it is like, wait a second, there's a ex-mayor in Montreal, because that is a suburb. And Luc Ferrandez, 2 days ago in Journal de Montréal, said, okay, we have to consider medical aid in debt to solve the healthcare problem. How come this man has a microphone? It's incredible. The ideology
Can I? Let me
what
just
will
interrupt you. I saw a picture yesterday. It was a poster. I'm not kidding, in front of a bus stop, and it said, "If you're feeling sick, please don't go to the hospital." That's what we're coming to.
but the trust is gone. The trust is gone. How do we regain the trust of people? There's a lot of people who don't go to vote, or they don't believe in politics because there's no trust. No trust, no gain. Huh?
Yeah.
Capitalism, no trust, no gain.
Yeah, well, reading the comments on the side, this is what you're seeing, right? It's trust has eroded to a point where nihilism becomes a valid option.
Exactly.
And myself, I can appreciate that because, I mean, I'm Irish. I hate everything anyway, but I can't resort to a nihilistic approach. So the solution to nihilism is not hope, because that and $3 will get me a coffee. The solution to nihilism is action,
Exactly.
and it must be action locally.
Exactly.
Comments were made about healthcare being a provincial issue. Let's have a look at the Constitution, right? So another comment about overreach, right? A disproportionate power. Let's look at the Constitution. Not the bits that talk about my rights, but the bits that talk about government responsibilities, or in business, what we call deliverables. Where the deliverable is the province is responsible for its own healthcare program. And the province can generate revenues internally to support that, right? The province should be responsible for its own internal resources. The province should be responsible for its own policing. The province should be responsible for, and the Constitution lays these things out. We are a confederacy. We're actually not a democracy. We're a confederacy. It's a different form, right? And that is, the province of Ontario should be responsible for their own health care. And at no point in time should Doug Ford or David Eby be crawling up to the government to look for some handoutsies, because that's not how this works, right? The transfer payments is an example of that, right? How do we step Quebec away from that incredibly rich teat, pardon my French, right? But how do you step them away in a manner that doesn't shock the province? Because that's not productive, right? So how do we reduce resentment, of provinces that are sending transfer payments to provinces that don't have them? And the provinces need to be delivered the autonomy that the Constitution guarantees. And what Trudeau does right now is he dangles the carrot and the stick, the carrot in one hand and the stick on the other. You're going to now do housing. What? And BC says, well, we can't afford to do that. Saskatchewan says, all right, we can't afford to do that. The numbers you're giving us are unrealistic. We can't afford to do that. And instead of the 12 ministers or 13 provincial ministers saying, how do you want us to do that? Which is them still bending the knee. They're just complaining while they bend the knee. They should collectively say, no, we have a constitution. Get off my land.
They
right?
don't do that. You know, Timothy, they don't do that.
Yeah, they won't do it. So that's why at the grassroots, right, we correct our leadership locally. So our mayors, our councillors, our school boards, we correct that issue because we can still do that through the vote. And we raise a generation, including our current selves, that says, I have no right to complain if I say nothing.
Yes, but they do. The big question would be with social media. They have the impression that they are active through X or whatever platform they use, and it's starting to look like entertainment. We can have a debate and discussion, but I do agree with you. We have to be present locally to be able to influence people, to talk to people. Then we cannot We bring the horse to the river, but we cannot force the horse to drink. So it's the big question is, how do we educate people, especially younger generation who are now not even people who are not voting? How do we interest them to, I would say, the political domain? Because they look at it like they look at it today, and they say, okay, it is a circus. We're not. People are corrupted, and they like you said, nihilism. They are, don't do nothing, we will take care of you. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So
Can I jump in on that one?
of course,
I find it's not like I always assume my target customer is a left of center voter. You know, somebody who wants to socialize healthcare, socialize everything. And if you, instead of antagonizing them, this is in answer to your question, Andre. How do we educate them? Instead of antagonizing them and be like, oh, you're a communist, just ask them like, what's your view on healthcare? If you, I swear, you get the most liberal like soccer mom, she'll tell you, it's like, I got this problem. I got an inner ear infection. I have to go to the U.S. I took my son to the hospital, 3 hours, and they'll talk like canaries. So if you, I find if you treat people with respect, you can break through to them, and then the big challenge of compromise starts, and maybe you can nudge them in the direction of something that works.
Well, that's relationships,
There you go.
right? So as opposed to us, and even the right over the last, well, certainly since 2019, the re-election of the Liberals, right? Certainly in that period, the left has this habit, and it's a social media phenomena. It's not happening so much in the real world because you don't see these fights happening in grocery lineups. So it's a social media thing where I can insult somebody across a computer screen because you can't reach through and smack me, right? Because we're getting
that's the
away with
reality.
behavior online, right? There's no comeuppance for it. So,
But
go ahead.
the grab of the social media. Uh, this is important because if we want to reach people, let's say now in BC, it will be the NDP that will govern. How do you? They will continue with their policies. They will not change. So people will one day want to see, I would say, a more conservative approach. How do they do that? They cannot have housing. They have, I would say, a criminality problem. Immigration is an issue because we see it everywhere. And it's not about stigmatizing people. It's about what are the possibilities for the younger generation. They will one day ask accountability. And provincial government, I don't know about BC, but I see a lot of provincial government. They're starting to shift to the right because they feel the anger of the population. It is when it starts to touch them, people who are elected, they start to understand. And I see a phenomenon since many years. You go everywhere where it is public services, and it says, "Oh, we will not." You have a small message. We will not tolerate verbal violence. But maybe this is a symptom of this. I would say the system. People, they arrive, they have bad services, they are not respected, and one day they raise the tone, and that's a normal reaction. How we will canalize this energy? Because I see that with what is happening now in BC, if they don't change nothing, the anger will just grow. It
Yeah.
will not.
My thoughts on strategy going forward for BC, particularly among those in supporters of the BC Conservative Party, is today is the day after election. Don't stop. Don't stop campaigning.
No, exactly.
Don't stop campaigning, right? And that includes taking the policy book of the provincial Conservatives and applying it to other elements within the Canadian bureaucratic system, right? So so rather than becoming hyper focused on the provincial MLA element itself, that supporters of the Conservative Party understand that they have now created a landmark conservative movement, right? So maybe the blue wave is not election night, but the blue wave is the event between this election and the next, and moving forward.
Or influence, or the influence on other election in
That's correct.
Canada.
That's correct, because New Brunswick and Manitoba, right? So now we go from BC perhaps being a barometer, but now you've got two others. Those three become a bellwether.
I don't know. I have a question about municipal election in BC. Do you have is it a mandatory date? I suppose election are always at the same time for all the cities in BC?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Why I say this, because we don't have this concept of left and right, or conservative and liberal in municipal election. It's all local party. So.
And we don't. And BC pundits like Global again last night were saying it shouldn't be permitted. No, this is in Manitoba. I think we made legislation. Alberta? I lost it. Making legislation to prevent political associations participating anywhere outside of provincial or federal elections. Because I know in Alberta has been something of a phenomena. It's Alberta, something of a phenomena at the municipal level and the school district level, where they're actually creating small political parties to support local and to collectivize local efforts. Right? And I'm completely in favor of that, because welcome to democracy, right? So these events that are happening at a provincial level can be supported, again, what I said about at a grassroots level. Be engaged with your local town hall, be engaged with your school board, and continue to participate in these I don't care if you're orange or red or green or blue or purple or chartreuse, right? I think you need to be engaged, right? You are a citizen and I still consider the freest country on the planet. Right.
Still, but toward municipal election, or toward municipal representation, we understand that there's no conservative, there's no liberal, there's no Democrat. So they all arrive with a program, but
that's a uniparty concept, right?
That's what I was referring to,
right? Where they've all been bought and paid for by the UN.
So it is everywhere. It is everywhere. If we start at the municipal level and we start to ask questions about the Agenda 2030, the constituent, they have to answer. They can take a municipal law, and it has to be according to something. Mm-hmm. If it is according to, I would say climate change.
Right.
They will start, for example, like now in Montreal, they want to impose a tax on the license plate based on climate change for cars, and it's fascinating because it's a provincial prerogative. But now the government of Quebec transferred this responsibility, a small part of it, to cities. And now people are very angry because they say, wait a second, I pay my license plate, I pay my year, and now it will go from $250 per year in Montreal to $1,000, because the city of Montreal will impose an additional tax.
Right.
And then you say, wait, where's the argument? How come you base your increase in taxes? What's the argument? They say, oh, it's to fight climate change. I saw a mayor in Montreal, because we have a lot of districts. I saw a mayor of Montreal. She was quoting the IPCC report. The poor woman, I'm pretty sure she did not read the document. It is 6,000 pages, but she's quoting it and she's referring to it like it is a argument of authority. Says, wait a second, and you will pass a municipal law based on that, and nobody can challenge you locally.
Yeah.
So if you arrive and you say, I'm a conservative, at the local level, and I say, I don't believe in climate change. I think it is a fabrication. There's always climate change. It is not an anthropic climate change. It's not made man. It has an influence. It has nothing to do with pollution. The CO2 does not follow the global warming. It's the temperature that change vary, and the CO2 varies with it. The correlation are not there. You arrive and you have good arguments, and they will pass the law anyway because you don't have any leverage, no counterpower. How people locally will be able to challenge their constituent in a town hall? They are not able to do that. They arrive and they have arguments, they have fact, they base their, I would say, their question on facts, and those people who are elected, they just deny it.
Andre, I think there is a solution, and it's just kind of like what Tim is saying, relationships. If you look at Jeff Colvin, he was the mayor of Chestermere. So he got together with a couple of other of his friends, and they saw corruption in this Alberta town, and they ran on an anti-corruption platform, and they all got in. But like, you have to build that slate, and you all have to go in with a vision. That vision was anti-corruption, and then you can. But you're right. If you're just one person and you go in and you got these like 6 climate change activists, it's a tough order.
So, but you understand my point, and I thank you for mentioning this, because creating a political party from nothing, and trying to base, you need people. First of all, you need people who can exchange, debate, disagree, and then after that, you need a good vision. What I see now, and with the conservative in BC, they went from 0 to 45. For me, it's a good achievement. It's a really good achievement, even if maybe the campaign was not as successful as they thought. Now, like,
to define success,
continue the campaign with good ideas.
Yeah. So now we're left defining success. I think going from 0 to half, that's the success.
Yes.
Right? 0 to half is a success.
Exactly.
And these are the things that we build on. Well, I think, and again, this is Jungian in its approach, but we have a culture that is so dependent on the next dopamine hit, right? That if we don't get the achievement, if we don't get the victory, if we don't get the thumbs up, if we don't get the laugh emoji and the share, that we feel that we haven't met our goals. My mom has a statement that really matters to me, and it says, you don't have to pass with flying colors to pass. Right? And it's 45 seats is astonishing. I knew we would do well. I predicted that we would win, but not by much. Right? So, and I'm still satisfied with this, because 45 is infinitely more than 0.
Exactly.
And I'm mathematically correct on that. Right? So,
as a citizen payment, are you satisfied? Is it a good we try to shake the temple, and first
it's progress.
Try to expose ideologies. Are you satisfied with this? Because I know you didn't vote with a lot of pleasure for the Conservative, but I'm pretty sure you would not have voted for the NDP or the Greens.
No, it's I get what Tim is saying. It's progress. Where I get angry is when I can see victory within your grasps, and you make certain mistakes along the way, and you don't secure that victory. That's what really bothers me. And I won't go into it, but Andre, you and I, we've talked about this offline. That's what bothers me. But yes, we're in a better position than we were under Horgan. We're in a better position than we were when we had Kevin Falcon and the BC United Party. And now, as Tim said, we have to keep fighting. And so that when the next election rolls around, the BC NDP doesn't undo what we did.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe, I don't know, maybe the Conservative gave a phone call to Kamala Harris, and that's why. So maybe we avoid that.
See, I look at this strategically, and again, I'm going back to to psychology, behavioral psychology, and that is, and historically, you have a wave of excitement happening among supporters of the BC Conservative Party. That wave of excitement, building relationships as the riding association, right, or an outreach of the now MLA locally, that excitement, right, can be contagious to the middle of the road orange, the middle of the road red, and pull independents back, right? Not the candidates, the voters. So this is an opportunity to say, did you vote NDP because you felt they were the best opportunity because there's no fighting the NDP? Because if so, we've showed you that there's light. And well, let's have a conversation, right? Payman mentioned talking to the woman rather than an abrasive, right, an abrasive opener or a typical social media, trigger event. Have a conversation. Ask, well, it's open-ended questions, right? Standard interview process, right? Ask open-ended questions. So now we have an opportunity to go to people who voted NDP, or people who voted Liberal, or people who voted Green, or people who voted Independent, and say, what do you think about the process? What are your ideas, right? And then you say, how can the Conservative Party BC be of service to you?
That's one aspect that I like. And I have another question about, I would say, the reaction. We are reacting today to the election, and I thank you for it to give me the opportunity to do it. I am curious about how other prime minister or government in other provinces will react. You know how they react toward Trump election? Everybody was painting him as Hitler, and it was like not possible, and everybody's like pushing in the same direction. How will other government or prime minister, if they react, do they react toward, let's say, Ontario, Doug Ford, how he will react to, I would say, the relative success of the Conservative in BC? Do they react? I don't know. I don't know if they do react, because let's say the prime minister, they all gathered together in a
I can answer that.
Thank you, answer that, because if they gather into an interprovincial, now the prime minister of BC will not be able to be as arrogant as before, because he knows that he has 45 member of parliament behind his back that are not with him.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to answer, if you watch Scott Moe, to me he's like a discount Bond villain. When he was vilifying the COVID guys, there's a video clip of him reading off a teleprompter. We will kill all the unvaccinated. Our patients have run out. And then when the donations stopped coming in, he did a 180 and
Yes.
he dropped the COVID policies and he took an anti-Ottawa stance. So these guys, they react. They pivot.
Yes, they react. But let's say, how will Danielle Smith react? I will not talk about François Legault in Quebec. I think he's sleeping, or he's too concerned about his corrupted government. But do they react? It's quite fascinating, because they are prime minister of provinces, and they have to work together, especially when they go with Justin Trudeau on a, let's say, an interprovincial and federal. They have influence. Now the Conservative in BC will have a big influence on the government. They cannot just say we will go to an interprovincial meeting and focus on the, I would say, the Paris Accord. That could be one, I would say, strategy, or one line of attack coming from the Conservative in BC. Will they do it? I don't know.
Tim, I'm just reading the notes here.
Yeah, I'm reading the notes. Saskatchewan's election this month. That's good. Thank you for the correction. I don't mind being wrong, but I hate being wrong, or I don't mind being corrected, but I hate being wrong. It's one of those. It depends on the time of day. Yeah. I think this is exceptional. I think this is exceptional. I'm not prepared in this conversation to go into how I feel this will pan out in federal politics, because I think right now this is BC's day. Payman is right. there are serious issues that prevented a sound victory. And by that, I mean probably 50 seats, right? The kind of thing that prevented that. And there are issues, and those are worth having conversations about. But in the moment, I'm encouraged, greatly encouraged. I think the candidates that did win did exceptional work in a very short period of time under a tremendous amount of pressure and almost no money. So this again speaks to the single most valuable resource in Canada, and that's human labor. So credit to the volunteers at every level who made this happen, and to the donors who did support. And a lot of donors are not supporting with money; they're supporting with vehicles or food or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So time and labor and other means as well. And this can set a tone. The populist movements are populist. They require the populists. They require the population. So if it is not grassroots and it is not a highly decentralized activity, there was conversation about over-centralization. If you do not find a grassroots effort that is a highly decentralized activity, it is probably not a genuine grassroots effort. A grassroots effort that relies on cults of personality is not a grassroots effort. It's a cult of personality. And so what I think makes the difference is a shared vision. I can have a highly decentralized organization as long as they have a shared vision. And I think that's coming.
I think we talked about it many times offline, and I like the idea because you mentioned something about being a volunteer. It's not always about money. It can be about knowledge. Some people, they have very good knowledge. They can help politically with their knowledge. Like you said, they can help with cars or with volunteering. It's not only, it is time.
Yes.
The time that they will take to help you change political ideas. We talk about today. We talk about political ideas. That's my main concern. How do we interest people into volunteering in a conversation? But after that, maybe their knowledge. Some people are they have a lot of skills, and we do not use the skill of people. This hierarchy. We put people in a spot, and we do not use their knowledge. A lot of people they're all intelligent. How come we're not focusing on that? And I would expect a provincial party to, because a provincial or municipal government should base its decision on the knowledge and the knowledge of the people. You have a problem with a small road that is broken. I'm a citizen. If I see that there's something is broken near my house, my duty is to call the city and or write an email. And it happened to me many times. And when they come and fix the problem, I'm happy, and I tell them, thank you, because you came, you fixed the problem. I'm happy. So we built a relationship like that. The cities, they're not our enemies, but it looks like now, because the way they are governing, we feel that we are threatened all the time, and we react according to those threats. We have to change this locally, and after that, slowly it will rise at I would say at the provincial level. I hope that they will understand that. I'm not sure.
So, gentlemen, how about you both gave some really good remarks? How about we end it there? We're at the 1 hour 30-minute mark.
Yes,
and I've been scanning the conversation on the side, and they're all very valid points. The degree of frustration is high, and that's okay, because that means the degree of commitment to a solution is equally high.
Exactly.
My favorite part was the rift between Alberta and Ontario. They started harassing each other, but we all love each other.
Well, almost.
Well, I said it already. I'm Irish. I hate everybody equally.
Yeah, I saw that comment. That was quite interesting.
It's equitable. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Andre, Tim, it's a pleasure as always.
Thanks you.
Again.
Thank you. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.